Two tails, one head. Yin yang. Two tails, one head. Yin yang. Two heads, one tail. Yang yin. Two tails, one head, yin yang. Two tails, one head, yin yang. Heart chakra, new edition. Thank you, my wife. 2 tails, 1 head, yin yang. Oops. Apologies. Hope that wasn't all garbled. All right. A passage from Vitality, Energy, Spirit. This comprehensive anthology traces the teaching on the 3 treasures, vitality, energy, and spirit, through the long history of Taoism, along with brief selections from the classic texts of Lao Tzu and Chuang Tzu. The book presents a rich selection of tales and sayings from Taoist literature, as well as a broad range of writings from the Complete Reality School. Lao Tzu said, "The energy that people receive from nature is one in terms of feelings of the senses towards sound, form, scent, and temperature. But the way in which it is managed differs. Some die thereby, and some live thereby. Some become exemplary people, some become petty people. The spirit is where knowledge gathers. When the spirit is clear, knowledge is illumined. Knowledge is the seat of the heart. When knowledge is objective, the heart is even. The reason people use limpid water for a mirror, not a moving stream, is that it is clear and still. Thus, when the spirit is clear and the attention is even, it is then possible to discern people's true conditions. Therefore, use of this inevitably depends on not exploiting. When a mirror is clear, dust does not dirty it. When the spirit is clear, habitual cravings do not dilute it." So if the mind goes anywhere, the spirit is there in a state of arousal. If you return it to emptiness, that will extinguish compulsive activity, so it can be at rest. This is the freedom of sages. This is why those who govern the world must realize the true condition of essence and life before they can do so. Lao Tzu said, "Sages close up together with darkness and open up together with light. Able to reach the point where there is no enjoyment, they find there is nothing they do not enjoy. Since there is nothing they do not enjoy, they reach the pinnacle of enjoyment. They use the inner to make the external enjoyable, and do not use externals to make the inner enjoyable. Therefore they have spontaneous enjoyment in themselves, and so have their own will, which is esteemed by the world. The reason it is so is that this is essential to the world in the world's own terms. It is not up to another, but up to oneself. It is not up to anyone but the individual. When the individual attains it, everything is included. So those who understand the logic of mental functions regard desires, cravings, likes, and dislikes as externals. Therefore, nothing delights them. Nothing angers them. Nothing pleases them. Nothing pains them. Everything is mysteriously the same. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is right. So there is consistent logic for men and consistent behavior for women. They do not need authority to be noble. They do not need riches to be wealthy. They do not need strength to be powerful. They do not exploit material goods. Do not crave social reputation. Do not consider high social status to be safe, and do not consider low social status to be dangerous. Their body, spirit, energy, and will each abides in its proper place. The body is the house of life. Energy is the basis of life. Spirit is the controller of life. If one loses its position, all three are injured. Therefore, when the spirit is in the lead, the body follows it, with beneficial results. When the body is in the lead, the spirit follows it, with harmful results. Those people whose lives are gluttony and lust are tripped and blinded by power and profit, seduced and charmed by fame and status, nearly beyond human conception. When your rank is high in the world, then your vitality and spirit are depleted daily, eventually to become dissipated and not return to the body. If you close up inside and keep them out, they have no way to enter. For this reason, there are sometimes problems with absent-mindedness and work being forgotten. When the vitality, spirit, will, and energy are calm, they fill you day by day and make you strong. When they are hyperactive, they are depleted day by day, making you old. Therefore, sages keep nurturing their spirit, make their energy gentle, make their bodies normal, and bob with the way. In this way, they keep company with the evolution of all things and respond to the changes in all events. Their sleep is dreamless. Their knowledge is traceless. Their action is formless. Their stillness is bodiless. When they are present, it is as if they were absent. They are alive, but are as if dead. They can appear and disappear instantaneously and can employ ghosts and spirits. The capabilities of vitality and spirit elevate them to the way, causing vitality and spirit to expand to their fullest effectiveness without losing the source. Day and night, without a gap, they are like spring to living beings. This is harmonizing and producing the seasons in the heart. So the physical body may pass away, but the spirit does not change. Use the unchanging to respond to changes, and there is never any limit. What changes returns to formlessness, while what does not change lives together with the universe. So what gives birth to life is not itself born. What it gives birth to is what is born. What produces change does not itself change. What it changes is what changes. This is where real people roam, the path of quintessence. Tales of Inner Meaning, Introduction. Fables, stories, and jokes have been used by practical philosophers for thousands of years as a means of conveying ideas and impressions to the receptive mind. They are particularly useful for subtleties that do not translate well into formal logic, and for making a direct impression by passing intellectual prejudices in the mind of the reader. Several examples of such tales of inner meaning are presented in this section of the present anthology. The first group of stories is drawn from the Li Tzu, a well-known classic and source of numerous popular tales whose currency has long since expanded beyond the realm of Taoism per se. There is a wide range of opinion about the date of this text, a question to which there would appear to be no satisfactory solution in conventional historical terms. For the purposes of the present translations, the extent of the significance of this matter is that there appear to be additions and comments that flatten some of the tales and tend to diffuse rather than clarify their inner Taoist meaning. Therefore, the stories from Li Tzu are rendered here in forms reflecting a synthesis of the written text and oral tradition. A number of the tales of Li Tzu are pithy and amusing. The first one presented here, the story of Confucius and the two boys, the learned man, illustrates the limitations of discursive reason, thus hinting indirectly at a more comprehensive mode of consciousness. Presented as a joke at the expense of Confucius, it illustrates how logic can be coherent within the bounds of its postulates, yet be ineffective or inaccurate in a larger context. While this is well understood today in the context of physics, it is not generally applied to the whole realm of cognitive knowledge as it is in practical Taoism. The next story presented here, the story of old Mr. Shang, capped by the remarks of Confucius, illustrates the metaphysical basis of the extraordinary powers attributed to concentration, the idea that subjective and objective worlds are relative and respond to each other as they change and evolve through their mutual interaction. The Poor Man in the Gold deals with the negative aspect of concentration. The joke about the man who stole the gold reinforces the observation that too much concentration on one thing can cause a person to overlook something else of equal or greater importance, and that focus on only one aspect of a situation can blind a person to other significant features of the total reality. This story can also be taken to show how concentration on transcendental matters at the expense of common sense leads to loss in both worlds. Who for Whom also revolves around the theme of one-sided concentration and biased awareness. In this case, the prejudice in question, what is now termed anthropocentrism, has to do with the relativity of importance and point of view. Like Christianity and communism, Confucianism is essentially an anthropocentric way of thought. The Taoist Li Tzu ridicules the Confucian attitude in this story, where a youth at a banquet of self-satisfied feasters makes a bold attack on human conceit, showing how assumptions about the order of nature reflect subjective biases and lose their presumed validity when examined in the larger perspective of the universe. This perception is central to ancient Taoist teachings on ecology, which antedate Western concern on the subject by thousands of years. The tale of the missing axe, suspicion, presents another view of the workings of subjectivity, one that also readily beckons insight into matters near at hand today. Ups and downs on the aged laborer and his employer illustrates mechanisms of compensation and balance, whose beginnings spring from a vantage point beyond one-sided views. The last two tales from the Li Tzu presented here illustrate the technique of mental fasting and the distinction between timeless and temporal aspects of consciousness. Following these tales, all of which are distinguished by their brevity, are three much longer stories from later literature of the type commonly known as hagiography. Ordinary academic and sectarian conceptions of hagiography are based on the premise that the subject of the sketch is being described, fictionally or truthfully, in such a manner as to justify or prove his or her authority or sanctity within a religious or cultural tradition. When one looks beyond his superficial understanding to observe the structure of the tales, however, it becomes clear that certain hagiographies contain inner meanings relating to principles and practices of spiritual sciences. The first biographical story presented here, the story of Wan Baochang, is of a master musician who lived in the Sui dynasty near the end of the 6th century CE. Music has been a matter of serious concern in Chinese thinking since ancient times, and Taoists in particular attributed profound power to its energy, as illustrated in an essay on the subject translated on page 156 through 157. The story of the master musician Wan Baochang graphically portrays the intimate connection between the state of a society and its music, as observed by ancient Confucians and Taoists alike. It also contains a traditional warning for Taoists in the master's separation from his wife and tragic end, that there is no possibility of ultimate success when the science of life, which deals with energy, becomes a passion in itself, divorced from the science of essence, the ultimate refinement of spirit. The next story, Golden Butterflies, is about a Japanese immigrant living in Tang Dynasty, China, 619 to 905, probably one of the many Japanese students and pilgrims who went to China during the early Qing to learn Chinese arts and sciences for their own newly developing nation of Yamato, Japan. The name of this particular individual, Han Shiho, or in Japanese, Kan Shiwa, would seem to indicate that he was in fact of fairly recent Chinese or Korean ancestry, as were many families among the upper classes of ancient Japan and the craft guilds they patronized. Kanshi was a master craftsman, one of the professional pursuits traditionally associated with Taoism. Although stories about him mention no details on this point, he was eventually also a martial artist, another profession with traditional Taoist connections, for he served in the imperial guard of the ruling house of the Tang. His story illustrates a number of Taoist ideas. His ability to make lifelike, moving replicas of insects, animals, and birds represents what is sometimes called taking over creation, the power to infuse inert matter, the physical body, with vitality, energy, and spirit. The relationship between the color of his mechanical insects and the food he gives them illustrates the way personality is formed by education and environmental influences. The story of the Golden Butterflies represents the Taoist theory of equalizing things in worldly terms through redistribution of wealth by nonviolent means. The last story in this section portrays the life of Ni Shi Dao, a distinguished priest in one of the Taoist religious orders. The story contains several important themes. One is the idea that the highest adepts can be found only by people with certain inner qualities, and that the visible face of Taoism is only one link in a sort of spiritual hierarchy connecting the human world to the celestial. Another is the distinction between immortality of spirit and immortality of energy. This story also uses the familiar Taoist time warp theme to illustrate the coexistence of different modes of experience possible to humankind. Tales of Inner Meaning, the Learned Man. One day Confucius was walking along with some disciples when they came upon two boys arguing. Confucius asked the boys what the dispute was about. They told him they are arguing about whether the sun was nearer at dawn and farther away at noon, or farther away at dawn and nearer at noon. One of the boys argued that the sun appeared larger at dawn and smaller at noon, so it must be closer at dawn and farther away at noon. The other boy argued that it was cool at dawn and hot at noon, so the sun must be farther away at dawn and closer at noon. Confucius was at a loss to determine which one was correct. The boys jeered at him. "Who said you were so smart?" The story of old Mr. Shang. Old Mr. Shang was a poor peasant whose strange fate began to unfold on the day his ramshackle little house was commandeered by a couple of arrogant young men belonging to the establishment of a local gangster. At that time, wealthy families with many followers and hangers-on could be as if a law unto themselves. Some families might have thousands of armed men on their estates. The gangster in question was the head of one such clan, and his followers were all young bullies from local well-to-do families. They spent their time dressing up in costly attire and gallivanting around, doing as they pleased. The boss of the clan was well known for being able to make a poor man rich or a rich man poor with a single word or a nod of the head. Even the government had him on the payroll, though he had no regard whatsoever for law and order and contributed nothing at all to the general well-being. Countless were the deluded young men who had been maimed or killed in senseless duels staged to fire the ambitions of yet other deluded young men, and to amuse the gangster and his gang. Old Mr. Shang thought he had discovered his chance to become a success when he overheard the two young men that had taken over his house talking about their leader. The very next day, old Shang set out for the residence of the gangster, who was such a big man that even the government paid him not to secede from the empire. When old Shang arrived, he was greeted with hoots and hollers of laughter and derision. Who was this bumpkin, come to join their gang? Clearly he was going to be no fun for a duel, so the boys decided to see how it looked when an old man hit the ground after a fall from a building 7 stories high. A number of young men took poor old Ching up this high tower and told him the boss was offering 100 pieces of gold to anyone who would jump off. Several of them made for the railing as if to be the ones to get the prize, so old Ching hurriedly jumped over. The hooligans held their breaths for a moment as they prepared to see the old man plummet to a gruesome death. What met their eyes instead was the sight of old Ching drifting lightly to the earth like a feather in the air. Unable to believe what they had seen, the young men dismissed it as a fluke, due perhaps to the sudden gust of wind that everyone had noticed. Next, they decided to take him to the river bend, where there was an infamous rapids full of holes with unmeasured depths. They told him of an enormous pearl lying at the bottom of a deep hole under the swift current, and said the boss had offered it to anyone who could fish it out. Old Ching plunged into the current without a moment's hesitation, only to surface moments later holding a huge pearl in his hand. This could no longer be passed off as a fluke, and old Ching was now given a place among the guests of the master of the house. Not long after that, a fire broke out in the storehouse. The boss told his followers that he would reward anyone who could retrieve his silk. Old Ching rushed right into the burning building and emerged unscorched with the silk. At this point, the hooligans were convinced that old Ching must be one of those who had attained the Tao, and they all begged forgiveness for having tricked him. They said, "We played tricks on you, not realizing you were one of those imbued with the Tao. We derided you, unaware you were a man of the spirit. You must think us ignorant, deaf, and blind indeed, but we wish to ask about your way." Old Ching said, "You mean you were joking?" When this was reported to Confucius, he said, "Someone who is perfectly sincere can affect things thereby." Old Ching believed in falsehoods, and things did not betray his trust. How much the more effective would truth and sincerity on both sides be? Make a note of this. The poor man and the gold. A poor man decided one day to get rich, so he put on his hat and coat and went to town. As he walked through the center of town, pondering the question of how to obtain riches, his glance happened to fall on someone carrying a quantity of gold. The poor man rushed up and grabbed some of the gold. He was caught as he tried to flee. The magistrate asked the poor man, "How did you expect to get away with the gold with all those people around?" "I only saw the gold," explained the poor man. "I didn't see the people." Who for whom? Once a man held a huge banquet with 1,000 guests. When someone presented a gift of fish and fowl, the host said appreciatively, "Heaven is generous to the people indeed, planting cereals and creating fish and fowl for our use." The huge crowd of guests echoed this sentiment. A youth about 12 years old, however, who had been sitting in the most remote corner of the banquet hall, now came forward and said to the host, "It is not as you say, sir. All beings in the universe are living creatures on a par with us. No species is higher or lower in rank than another. It's just that they control each other by differences in their intelligence and power. They eat each other, but that does not mean they were produced for each other. People take what they can eat and eat it, but does that mean that heaven produced that for people? If so, then since mosquitoes bite skin and tigers and wolves eat flesh, does that not mean that heaven made humans for the mosquitoes and created flesh for tigers and wolves?" Suspicion. Once a man found that his axe was missing and suspected his neighbor's son of having taken it. Observing the youth walking around, the man was convinced that his was the walk of a thief. The youth looked like a thief and talked like a thief. Everything he did pointed to his having stolen the axe. Then one day the man happened to find his missing axe. After that, he noticed his neighbor's son wasn't behaving like a thief anymore. Ups and downs. Mr. Yin of the state of Chao was a prosperous businessman. His employees worked without rest from early morning until late at night. Among them was an old laborer whose physical strength was virtually exhausted, yet who worked all the harder for that. By day he did his work, huffing and puffing, grunting and groaning. By night he slept soundly, thoroughly exhausted. As the old worker slept, his spirit relaxed and expanded. Every night he dreamed he was a king, a leader of the people, commanding the affairs of the nation, roaming at leisure and reveling in villas, enjoying whatever he wanted, his delight beyond compare. When he woke up, he would go back to work. When someone expressed pity at how hard the old man toiled, he responded, "People may live 1,000 years, but that is divided half and half into day and night. In the daytime I work like a slave, and I can't deny that it is miserable. At night, however, I am a king, and my pleasure is incomparable. So what have I got to complain about?" As for the boss, Mr. Yin, his mind was occupied with his business, his thoughts concentrated on his affairs, so his body and mind were both tired. At night he also collapsed with fatigue into a deep sleep. Every night he dreamed he was a servant, rushing around all the time doing one chore after another, being scolded and beaten time and again. So he used to huff and puff and grunt and groan the whole night through. Mr. Yin was unhappy about this state of affairs and consulted a friend about it. His friend said, "You have status and wealth far beyond that of most people, but at night you say you dream you are a servant. Well, the alternation of suffering and ease is normal. If you want to have it good both in working life and dream life, I'm afraid that is asking too much." After that, Mr. Yin lightened his worker's load and reduced his own concerns, so both got a bit of relief. The bottom trigram of our hexagram is solid, solid, broken. Which is the trigram Dewey, lake or marsh. Dewey is lake and marsh, abundant energy that teems with life. She is the impulse to communicate, share and exchange, and delights in both inner and outer conversation. She brings things into circulation and gives them voice. This is the sheer enjoyment of participating in life to the full, expressing ourselves and hearing others and satisfying our desires. Lake is the youngest daughter, spirit of the fertile west and of autumn. Top trigram is solid, 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 which is Quinn, heaven. Here's Dewey, lake or marsh, and here's Quinn, heaven. Quan. Quan is suprahuman cosmic law. Enduring, he determines the nature and development of all things, from the movement of the stars to the cycle of the seasons, to causing each individual seed to grow into its own kind of plant. Heaven is creativity in its pure form, the force that drives change and what endures within it. He confronts us with truth in what it demands, both as the absolute law of nature and as the challenge of individual calling, experienced as an inner law. He is both the awareness of what to do and how to be, and also the power to act on it. Heaven is Father, found in the northwest, the realm between autumn and winter, when the buds set and seeds fall to earth. Those two trigrams together will give us hexagram 10. I-ming, as a Taoist adept, wrote the Taoist I Ching in 1796. And Thomas Cleary has so kindly translated it for us. Hexagram 10, treading, progress, advance of the positive, prevention of danger by caution, empowerment by calmness and trust. Treading, hexagram 10. Even when they tread on a tiger's tail, it doesn't bite people. This is developmental. Explanation. Treading means forward progress. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is heaven, strong, and below is lake, joyous. Yin is rejoicing in yang. With the advance of one yin, the hexagram will change into pure yang. Representing this, it is therefore called treading. This hexagram symbolizes progression of yang and prevention of danger. It follows on the preceding hexagram, a cord. In a cord, yin follows yang. But if you want yin to follow, it is necessary first to advance yang. When the progression of yang reaches proper balance, yin naturally follows it. This is the appropriate priority of the path of advancing yang. The true yang in people is inherent and need not be sought from another. When it mixes with acquired conditioning, true feeling is obscured and arbitrary feelings arise. Then true yang runs away outside. This is likened to a tiger running off and staying elsewhere as a member of another house. Though it is in another house, originally the tiger is one's own. It is just that people are not willing to call it back. The way of calling it back is not sought in heaven or earth or fire or water, but only in lake. Lake is the youngest daughter. In the so-called temporal arrangement of the trigrams are associated with members of a family. Heaven is father, earth is mother, thunder is eldest son, wind is eldest daughter, water is middle son, fire is middle daughter, mountain is youngest son, and lake is youngest daughter. Lake, as the youngest daughter, travels the path of receptive submission in place of Mother Earth, and is able to revert to yang by the culmination of yin. Its nature is harmonious and joyous. Being harmonious, it can relax. Being joyous, it can trust. Being relaxed, it can go gradually. Trusting, it can endure long. Able to relax and trust, powerful practice unrelenting, it is thereby possible to advance to the stage of indestructible firmness and strength, to again see the original face of heaven, and not be injured by false yin and false yang. This is likened to treading on a tiger's tail without its biting people, and having a way of development and growth. A tiger is something that bites people. It is most dangerous to tread on it. If one can tread with harmony and joyfulness, without excessive ferocity, it is like treading on a tiger's tail. If one is careful, as if treading on a tiger's tail, looking ahead and behind, striking a balance without obsession or indifference, proceeding gradually in an orderly manner, forestalling danger, aware of perils, carrying out the firing process without error, then the yin can be transmuted into yang and the yang can be restored to purity. Not only is one not bitten by the tiger, one can even take over the living energy in its killing and preserve life and being whole. This path of development and achievement without obstruction or hindrance through advancement of yang, treading strongly with harmony and joy, is of great benefit. And then further commentary by I-ming on treading, hexagram 10. Heaven above, lake below. Above is the sky, below is a lake. Treading. Thus do superior people distinguish above and below, and settle the will of the people. Treading means progressive ascent. Above is heaven, below is lake. The sky covers the lake. The lake looks up to the sky. So above and below have fixed positions which cannot be mixed up. This is the image of treading. What superior people see in this is that the metaphysical is called the Tao and the physical is called the vessel. There is a distinction between the greater and the lesser, a difference between the noble and the base. The higher is not to be considered lower, and the lower is not to be considered higher. The greater is not to be considered lesser, and the lesser is not to be considered greater. The noble is not to be considered base, the base is not to be considered noble. This is whereby to distinguish above and below and settle the will of the people, not allowing transgression through false ideas. The celestial is the ruler. This is higher, above. The earthly is citizenry. This is lower, below. When one can distinguish the higher and lower, then right and wrong, sanity and aberration are clear, not doing anything inappropriate, sustaining the celestial and controlling the earthly, cultivating the real and dissolving the false, thoughts not arising inwardly, external things not entering the mind. Myriad things are all empty of absoluteness, and all mundane feelings involved with objects are settled. In the body of the hexagram, lake is the mundane, representing arbitrary feelings. Heaven is the celestial, representing true sense. When the mundane treads under the celestial and the celestial treads on top of the mundane, then arbitrary feelings do not arise and true sense is always present. True sense is unemotional sense. Using unemotional sense to control feelings is like a cat catching a mouse, like boiling water being poured on snow. In a short time, calamity turns to fortune. The will of the people is settled, and there is nothing to thwart the Tao. Then one gradually puts into practice the pure, unadulterated vitality of firm strength in proper balance. But settling the will of the people is all a matter of being able to distinguish the higher and the lower. The stability attained will be in proportion to the degree to which this distinction is successfully made. If there is any lack of clarity in this distinction, there will be that much instability. Therefore, the sages' science of fulfillment of nature in comprehension of life requires thorough investigation of principle as the first step. Question we bring to the I Ching will have the general context of how can I act in creative relation with the spirits or forces shaping this moment of time. Hexagram 10, treading. Key questions. Where is the tiger? Do you know how to work with such power? Oracle, treading a tiger's tail. It does not bite people, creating success. There are tigers in the outer world and also inner tigers. As you get close, it's good to recognize the tiger for what it is. Treading the tiger's tail is perilous, yet if you can move in harmony with it, you can invite its power into your own life as protection, fertility, and blessing. To do this without getting bitten requires both skill and care. Look to the power and intensity you are drawn to in the situation. Its specific danger is there, and also its potential gift. Image. Heaven above lake, below, treading. A noble one differentiates above and below, and makes a place for the people's aspiration. The depths of the sky are reflected in the lake as it dances below heaven. An awareness of other dimensions of reality enters an inner dialogue, and this becomes aspiration. It's as natural for people to aspire as it is for the lake to reflect. By marking out the difference between above and below, a noble one shows there is a direction to travel and a distance to cross. This means differentiating the idea you aspire to from your step-by-step progress as you follow it. Sequence. Treading follows from Hexagram 9, small taming. Things are tamed, and then there are the rituals, and so treading follows. First you learn the rules for working with great power, inwardly or outwardly, and then you can move with it more freely and harmoniously. .48 in the Tao Te Ching, translated by Jia Fu Fang and Jane English. 48. In the pursuit of learning, every day something is acquired. In the pursuit of Tao, every day something is dropped. Less and less is done until non-action is achieved. When nothing is done, nothing is left undone. The world is ruled by letting things take their course. It cannot be ruled by interfering. Hmm.